Hello, everyone. I'm just going to get straight to the point. I want to talk to you, tell you what the Lord has shown me. And, the Lord, He says that what has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again, that there's nothing new under the sun. And you'll find that in Ecclesiastes 1:9. And I want to speak to you prophetically and spiritually about where the church is at today in America, especially in America and different parts of the world. Now, Jesus, he said this, he said, you can look at the clouds and you can say that it's going to rain. And he said, can't you discern the signs of the times? And so, on May 15th, 1948, Israel became a nation again, recognized by the United Nations and the rest of the world. And this marked a place that we are now truly in the last days, that fulfilled the prophecy of Ezekiel and many other prophets that the Lord would call back Israel from different parts of the world, and they would become a nation in one day. And we've seen that happen in 1948. Now, since then, and the parallel to that is, when Israel, the children of Israel, came out of Egypt, and we all know Egypt is the place of bondage. And today the church is also the spiritual Israel. And when Israel went into the promised land, which is a picture of the new covenant, it's a picture of the finished work. There's houses there they didn't build, wells they didn't dig, vineyards they didn't plant, and it's all for them. The place is finished, and it's a land that flows with milk and honey. It denotes abundance. And what was a physical land for them is a spiritual covenant for us. It represents the new covenant, the place of the finished work, where everything is based on the work of another, and it's all for us to enjoy. Now, so what has happened? But when they went into the promised land, there was some battles to be fought. Now, this shows us that when we come into the new covenant, that the Lord, He showed us this. He showed us how to win in the new covenant. And that was through our speaking. That's the battle of Jericho. And how did they win? It was the blast of a shofar. And the shofar is a picture of the finished work. The ram had to die. Jesus is the ram. And when we blow the shofar, we're saying, the work is finished. The work is finished. Right now, so our new covenant preaching, you can say, is a blasting of the shofar. We're saying, we're preaching that the work is finished. And that's how we win in the new covenant, is we speak, and we've seen that movement, word of faith, many call it. Later on, many turned it into a formula. When there's no formulas in the new covenant, Jesus, He eradicated every 1, 2, 3 step, and He eradicated every formula. Now today, everybody comes freely. You don't have to qualify to come. We all come for free. And so that battle they fought at Jericho, it was 6 days. Now, was there another battle that was fought in 6 days? Yes, and it's called the 6-Day War. And so, and that happened in 1967. And the church, then the next battle that Israel lost. And I used to have a problem with this. I used to have a problem with why did they lose? Why did Israel lose? Why did the church lose? Because this is a picture, a type of the new covenant, and these believers lost. And somebody might say, well, it's sin in the camp. That is the old interpretation. And Jesus says this in the new covenant, that he remembers your sins no more. That's part of the new covenant. So it's not sin in the camp. And let me tell you this as well. How many of you know there's always sin in the camp? Always. Always. And so it's not that. Let me tell you what caused them to lose, because it's the same thing that causes the church to be set back and have a seeming loss today, and that is mixture, mixing law with grace. And somebody might say, how is that? Remember, the law is just types and shadows. And the man who stole a Babylonian garment. Now let me tell you about this Babylonian garment, because a Babylonian garment, first of all, Babylon in Hebrew means confusion by mixing. I tell you, you can't make this stuff up. And believers are confused when they think they're under a little bit of law and a little bit of grace, and it's neither. It's neither Old Covenant and neither New Covenant, and they will be confused. And the only way a believer can fall under a curse today is falling under the curse of the law. And someone might say, well, it's bitterness, it's unforgiveness. Let me tell you where bitterness stems from. The Lord, he says, be careful. He says, lest you fall from grace. He says, lest any root of bitterness come. So first, someone falls from grace, and then comes bitterness. And the scriptural definition for falling from grace is you who seek to be justified by the law. He says, you have fallen from grace. So falling from grace, you don't fall from grace when you sin. You fall from grace when you try to earn your way. Earn grace, because grace is unearned favor. And so when somebody tries to earn their way, they fall under the curse. Interesting. And this is where I see, especially the church in America is at today. I feel compelled, to share this with you all, because as of late, I've seen, people say, the church failed the prophets, and they're blaming the church. And let me tell you, about something about New Covenant prophecy. New Covenant prophecy doesn't require anything from you to bring it to pass. And any problem that the believer has today, the believer can be traced back to law and mixture. Every problem. And so, this man Achan, he stole a Babylonian garment, and Jesus doesn't want you wearing a garment of mixture. He wants you wearing the fine linen, which is the righteousness of the saints. And he said that what happened was he took gold and silver and he buried it under the earth. Now, God, he says that the earth is cursed. The dust is cursed. And gold represents redemption. And, silver represents redemption. And gold represents divine righteousness or deity. And so the church, as of what I see happening right now, is they have redemption. They have righteousness as a gift. But because of mixture, they have buried it under the dirt, so to speak. which is cursed and paramount to falling under the curse of the law. And this is what causes a believer to be stressed, worried, and when stress is there, then health issues come. However, what I also see is very interesting is the church is now coming out of that. You notice this, a friend of mine, Lance Wallnow, got a word from the Lord that Trump was a Cyrus. And let me tell you this, whether you're for Trump or not for Trump, that's not the issue here. What I'm talking about is the timeline and the significance, because what happened next was, and you can't make this up, what happened next was President Netanyahu of Israel called Trump a Cyrus as well. And they even made a coin. You can Google this yourself. They made a coin with Cyrus's image on one side and Trump's image on the other side. But what I'm saying is this, and you'll find, and first let me say this, you'll find this quote from Netanyahu in the Times of Israel, and it was from 2018. This is what Netanyahu said, quote, "I want to tell you that the Jewish people have a long memory. So we remember the proclamation of the great King Cyrus the Great, the Persian king 2,500 years ago. He proclaimed that the Jewish exiles in Babylon could come back and rebuild our temple in Jerusalem. We remember 100 years ago, Lord Balfour, who issued the Balfour Proclamation that recognized the rights of the Jewish people in our ancestral homeland. We remember 70 years ago, President Harry S. Truman was the first leader to recognize the Jewish state. And we remember how a few weeks ago, President Donald J. Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Mr. President, this will be remembered by our people through the ages." Unquote. Now, what I'm saying is this. This is what happened in the Bible. King Cyrus allowed, first of all, the Jews were in captive in a place called Babylon. Confusion by mixing. And King Cyrus allowed the Jews to go back to their homeland, the place of the finished work, and rebuild the temple. And that's where I see the American church right now, that many are catching the revelation of how the work is finished. And let me tell you something about how the work being finished, is to simply know that I have no part to play in my salvation. It's all Jesus. All Jesus. And our believing has to stem from that foundation. Otherwise, it is mixture. Anytime we add ourselves into the mix, it's mixture. And so, when someone is in mixture, there's confusion. And it's very interesting. In Deuteronomy 28, one of the curses of the law is confusion. And, and this is why, I seen people, pointing the finger at the prophets. They say the prophets. Well, first of all, let me say there's more than the 4 or 5 prophets that you follow on social media out there. Literally tens of thousands, And so, they were blaming them, and others were blaming the church, saying it was the church that didn't step up. Well, this is what the Lord said to me some years ago. When you blame people, you put yourself under the law. Because when you blame someone else, what you're saying is, I don't have to change. And when you blame someone else, you make yourself the center. You make yourself the plumb line, so to speak, when Jesus, he is the baseline. And, but what I see now was, you know, when the Jewish people came out of mixture, out of Babylon, this is what happened. Well, many of them didn't even know their own language. And they didn't know who the priests were anymore. They lost their identity. And this is what mixing law and grace does. It causes the church to lose their identity. Oh, praise the Lord, the church is coming out of it. Now, this is how they came out of it. And this is how Joshua discovered that it was Achan. And by the way, Achan, you know what it means? Trouble. Because when you mix old and new covenants, you will get yourself into trouble. Now, how Joshua discovered that it was Achan is through the Urim and the Thummim. And when the Israelites came out of Babylon, confusion by mixing, they said they didn't know who the priests were until a priest rose up and could consult the Urim and the Thummim and tell them who they were. Now, Urim and Thummim in the Hebrew literally means lights and revelations. And I believe that you are listening to a light from Jesus. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about him and his word. And revelations from Jesus that are telling the people who they are and reminding the people who they are. And now, once the church is out of mixture and a believer is out of mixture, they didn't lose again. Never lost again. I have a lot more to say, but I want to keep this short. And I see, voices from all over the world and the nation are going to be raised up, crying out that grace is the gospel, and truly having a revelation of what that means and being able to articulate that to the listeners, that the listeners will then get a revelation of who Jesus has made them to be in him. And this is what is going to get a hold of the millennial, of Gen Z, of all these ones that have walked away from the church. It's the gospel of grace that truly unveils the love of Jesus, who Jesus truly is, the Jesus of the scriptures, the Jesus that the sinner, the pimp, the prostitute, the tax collector all run toward, and there's always a crowd around Jesus. And so I love you all, and we will talk to you all again soon. Jesus bless you.